The music's
We
back. Yeah.
are back. The music's back. We're back just like we promised. Matthew Bartlett at theroost.com. I'm the director over there. We got JP Heath, voice of the Rice Owls. We promised, rain or shine, to come back this week and talk Rice Owls football. And I'm just glad it was a little bit of a shine. It was a 69-point shine. JP, first off, how do you feel?
Much better than last week. Mucho better than last week. Nate and I, if you're not familiar with our broadcast stylings on the airwaves, Nate, our fine analyst who has appeared on this very show many a time, said how did he put it? I don't want to misquote him. You think I'd remember because I was just going to make the point. But the long and the short.
You were in the booth.
I was in the booth and I did remember what he was going to say, what he said when I started the sentence. But essentially, the Owls made the best of a bad showing in the first game by the most authoritative of win in the second game. And it wasn't necessarily who they played because, FCS, Texas Southern, they're going to have a fine season at their level, but it was the way Rice performed in that game. It was their attitude, their mean streak. Yeah, they dominated in the trenches, what they're supposed to do. And what was it? The third most points in school history, the second biggest margin. So they did exactly what they needed to do, bouncing back in a scenario like that.
Yeah, I did see my favorite quote from head coach Mike Bloomgren after the annihilation, which is what it was. He said, more than anything, we just needed to play another game. I would have played Jones Junior High or I would have played Alabama. We just needed to play somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what it felt like. So, man, you save up those 69 performances. This is like baseball. Like you win 10-0 one day and then the next day is a 2-run game. You can't carry over any of those runs, but would have saved a couple of those touchdowns once you got to 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 we can save for the bucket. But it doesn't work that way. I guess we saw what we needed to see, and that was a good thing. And that sets us up for, I guess, officially, as of right now, the penultimate edition of the Bayou Bucket. Is that just weird to hear as it is for me to say?
Yeah, because what was it officially? It came out, I remember during camp, like we knew a few days before it was announced that and the reason it happened, you'd like to say on a Rice show, oh, it was them Cougars, they're scared. There are reasons behind it. It's because of the Big 12 scheduling model. If it makes you feel better as a fan, to
be fair, but it was the Cougars, but it was the Big 12 scheduling model.
Yes, but it was
Rice
the Cougars.
Not playing the Big 12 last time I checked.
Yes, not yet, right?
Not yet. But at time of recording.
Yeah, the winds change fast here in college athletics. But yeah, it's because of the scheduling model. But long and the short of it, I find it very hard to believe that this will be the penultimate one and that next year will be the last one. I think they've got to find a way to keep this going. If you remember, there was a break. Was it 6 years or 5 years in between the two meetings before? I'm just judging off my gray matter bookmarks there. That I remember that there was a stretch of, to keep with the debate season, a political tenure, a presidential tenure between the times they met. So these things happen. I don't think there's the animosity between the two, like a certain state school in Austin and a certain state school in Aggieland that will not play for umpteen years. No, I think
12.
They will get playing again.
That game is coming back.
Thankfully, yes.
I am so grateful. If I can put out one request to the football scheduling gods, can we please get Rice a Friday night game in the final week of the season so that we can watch the, spectacular disaster that will be A&M and Texas meeting again? In one way or another, it's going to be glorious. So I'm worried that'll overlap. By the way, we are waiting. We're trying to get a word with Ted Pardee, longtime excellent radio analyst for the Cougars, coming up in a second. We'll take a look inside Bordy, and we'll go back and forth about some keys to a win against the Cougars and just the matchup in general. But yes, that's the day, the USF game, right? Yeah, final game of the regular
Saturday.
season.
Yeah.
The American has that as a flex game right now. So I imagine they'll bump one good game to Friday night. We'll see who it is.
Okay.
You never know. That's not me reporting anything. That's me wishfully thinking. It would be
While
nice.
we're waiting on Mr. Pardee, can we talk about one, I guess you could call it late breaking piece of news that you reposted here? I just learned from you, kind of saw it coming, but the announcement coming that Play Wyatt will miss the rest of the season after that season opening injury against the Sam Houston Bearcats. A huge loss when you lose your leading tackler at that Viper safety hybrid linebacker position. Unfortunately, the way he landed and right after the fact and seeing him the week after, you kind of had an idea, but kind of official now. You're without one of your best defenders the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's tough. And we know this because Play came out and he put it on Instagram himself. And this is a tough dude. This is a very motivated dude. So he is already talking comeback and what he's going to be able to do next season. So God willing, we will get Play back on the field in a Rice uniform at some point. It's just not going to be this year, which is pretty tough. And I will say it gives, the silver lining, if there is any, maybe a gray lining, I don't know, is that Rice has, the defensive secondary in the safety room was one of the rooms they felt really, really good about coming into the season. And to have Marcus Williams, a guy who has started multiple games already for the Owls, to be able to step in. And we were talking about, you got Peyton Stevenson, who has been just a stalwart on special teams. So they got some guys, which is nice. Hey, we got some guys joining the chat. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here. So, yeah, it's tough news, and it's just part of football, man. It's the not fun part of football.
Mm-hmm. And it's why you grow that depth, Captain Obvious says. And Nate and I were talking on the broadcast with Wyatt going down and Marcus Williams got the start, that they've got that depth now. And Williams, we haven't seen that long stretch from. He played I had Bordy pulled up here off the top of the noggin.
A couple games, and then he got hurt.
Yeah, he missed most of the last 11.
2/3, something like that.
Yeah, 10 games, 2/3 of the season. So he's a hoss back there. While he hasn't had that extended stretch here on South Main, this guy is highly regarded. You remember when he came in, much ballyhooed. So unfortunately, the part of having that depth is you have to test it. And now's that time you have to do it, going against big Power 4 opposition in that team across town.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was talking with some Houston folks earlier this afternoon. They told me there's 2 returning starters, and I think we'll get to it, on the Houston defense. So a lot of changeover on both sides, and it'll be interesting. I do kind of want to ask you, just as we table set here, I know that you're not a gambler, and that I don't know how many gamblers we have listening here, but I think it's interesting because this is, as you mentioned, a Power 4 matchup for Rice, who is not in a Power 4 league yet. At the time of recording, we joke, but these are traditionally games where one side is expected to win, and it's not expected to be particularly close. As of right now, the spread, the betting line on this game is 4 points in favor of Houston. And in years past, when this game has been played, Houston has been a 2-touchdown favorite, if not more. So going into this game, last year and the year before, Rice really played Houston tough. It was hard to tell that one of these teams was in a different conference division of football than the other one was. So setting the stage now, when, the experts in the desert say that this is supposed to be a close game, does that kind of change mentally how you were approaching this game? I know the stock answer we'll get from the team is, it's just the next game, not more important. Yeah, I get it. And I understand why they say that. But from you as a broadcaster, how does your mind kind of approach a Bayou bucket that, people think is supposed to be one of the closer games that we've had in this rivalry in quite some time?
I think a lot of things, Brother Bartlett, as you well know. One, the anecdote I'll share with you that I text you. The reason I'm not into gambling is, let's go over it. One, I don't have any money. Okay. Most importantly, we can't do it from the restrictions of the job. One at Rice and at Learfield. I kind of work at the McDonald's inside the Walmart. It's Rice, it's Learfield. So, and I have no idea what I'm talking about in those situations. And it's not my nature, very conservative by nature, scratching those pennies together. So, but I say all that as a preface. I always find it interesting, and listening to different podcasts, those that pontificate on such matters, that sometimes it is a big deal when it's projected to be that close. There's a reason that they've got big air-conditioned buildings in the desert, but other times they're way off. It's the human element. But I think with a rivalry game like this, that vitriol is probably not the same as it is for A&M and Texas, or Texas and OU, or the big rivalries, just because Rice and Houston haven't played each other absolutely every year. But a lot of the guys still know each other. And after talking to guys like Brant Banks earlier in the week, Houston native, he was referencing playing Colorado, I think it was. Rivalry games like this are what they play for. Rivalry games like this are what they coach for. They got the big, beautiful bucket, ugly bucket on the line, as Coach Bloom was telling me earlier in the week, is what it's about. And they love these types of matchups. It's why college football, in some people's opinion, is so much greater than the NFL. The pageantry of it, the close-knit nature of the communities that surround it. So, yeah, it is so awesome to be a part of a game like this, because let me tell you, from the player's perspective, it's different. Like media types like us, yahoos, from the coaches, but just that extra pep in the step, getting ready for a game week like this. There's nothing like it. It's so cool to have a job. Wait a second, they're paying me money to get ready in a week like this. It's just amazing. I think I answered like 9 of your next questions there. It's just the best.
I will say there's 2 instances where a rivalry game becomes that next tier of, oh, it's a rivalry, to like, oh, okay, we're in. And it's the A&M Texas level game, Auburn Alabama game, where over the past like 40 years, they've split it 2020. It's the rivalry games where it's just dead even and you don't know, and it doesn't matter who's ranked higher. It's those games. And then it's the other games where it's a rivalry that, it's not split 50-50. It might be 80-20 or 90-10, but the team that's not supposed to win just won. Those are the games where it gets feisty, because if you're the team that was supposed to win, well, you darn well can't lose it twice. And that's what Rice is looking at right now, because Rice hasn't won back-to-back buckets since 2001. So, and granted, they haven't played every year, but we're looking at 20 years. And there are people at the building across town that they don't want to be the ones associated with, we're the first Houston team that lost the bucket back-to-back years. Mm-hmm. So I think this one last year had some angst, like people were excited, but this one, it cranks it up another level, because you have that additional factor.
And just the game, I know we all lived through it last year. Most of us remember it, just double overtime, Luke McCaffrey going bananas, the big lead. Then Houston comes back and ties it. And then JoJo Jean, right in that back to our right, the back right corner of the end zone, knocks away that 2-point try from U of H. Pandemonium ensues, I know, with me, and trying to nail that final call. And then, that, like we said 2 minutes ago, that's what adds the extra flavor to a rivalry game like this. We're still waiting to connect with Ted Pardee, longtime excellent radio analyst with the Houston Cougars. But do you want to start like just looking at both sides of the ball? And if we get with Ted, hopefully we do.
Yeah. Let's start
offense.
Let's start offense, because I want to share an anecdote from this week. I talked with Rice defensive line coach Cedric Calhoun, because we were talking about similarities and differences between this Houston team and the one last year. One of the similarities is quarterback Donovan Smith. is back. And if Rice fans remember that game, he was running like crazy, was a big boy up the middle. I think Bloomgren called him Dante Culpepper. But one thing that Coach Calhoun and I both agreed is if it gets to a 4th and goal, 2-point conversion type, they're not throwing a fade this year. It's going to be a QB power with Mr. Donovan Smith, and they're going to live with him on the ground.
Yeah, he is such a it's kind of phased out the vernacular, dual threat quarterback, because it's kind of assumed that guys, they can pick up yards, but he's bull in the China shop type of good. Like, he can just wreak havoc on another team's defensive line and dole out some punishment and truly make it 11 on 11. And that concerns me about this matchup, because you saw I imagine somewhat unexpectedly in the Sam Houston game when name's already blanking. That's see how much my psychology, I just blanked it out of my memory.
Put it out of your mind.
Yeah. In the Sam Houston game, their quarterback that had that true
something,
the dual threat option, that is what is really scary. And Donovan Smith can do that. And played some at Texas Tech. He's got his dad, an NFL assistant coach, and this is Bordy, not near completed. One does not rush a masterpiece, Mr. Bartlett.
Hunter Watson.
Hunter Watson. Thank you. All the Hunter Watson fans in the chat are just pounding at their keyboards. But he can go. I forget his exact stat total in last year's game, but he is a great, great player at quarterback. And you have to think in this era, I mean, everybody's moving at the shake of a dime in college football, just to get a little bit extra. I admire him for staying there off Cullen and seeing it through a coaching change. I don't pretend to get into the NIL particulars and what was thrown at him to get him to stay, if anything, but I have total respect for him. And when you're going against a dude like that on the other side of the ball, I mean, he is an all Big 12 caliber quarterback. I don't know where it'll shake out, but it wouldn't surprise you in the end if he's second, third team, or honorable mention all Big 12. He's the type of guy that can make those plays and hurt you in a few different ways.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple different schools of thought when it comes to quarterback play. And I think one factor in particular applies with Donovan Smith is this guy is kind of a wild card. And I think that is both good or bad for the matchup with the Owls. Is you can go put in the guy who is going to be boring, make the read, do the play, don't take the risk. And that's not Donovan Smith. He's going to take some shots. He's going to have some plays in this game where both sides are ripping their hair out because he did something that you did. What? That's probably going to be good or bad. So you're going to, with him, he's going to be a guy that's going to take the shot and throw into traffic and get picked off because he shouldn't have. And he's also going to be the guy that decides to pull it and run it and just run over 4 people at the goal line. And is what it is. That wasn't the play, but it worked. So you're going to play with fire with him, and it's going to be interesting. One thing I did want to hit on while you're at it, this is something that I want to see how Rice responds with, because you have Rashawn Sanford up there at running back. They have a handful of different guys who have gotten a good amount of carries so far this year with the Cougars, and the running game has been meh. And part of that is they faced UNLV and Oklahoma, and those are expected to be 2 pretty salty defenses. Mm-hmm. But another part of it is, so many new guys and some turnover, a lot of guys that haven't done it at Houston yet. So that's one of the things that I'm kind of circling with this game is, Rice had that get right, and they were able to stop Texas Southern from running the ball, weren't able to keep it between the tackles in front of them against Sam Houston. Where are we at? Where is Houston on that spectrum? Can they plug it up, particularly inside the numbers between the tackles, and force Houston to do things, longer developing plays to the outside, and actually be able to complete passes down the field?
Yeah, bingo. No surprise. Very wise point there. What was it? The note we read earlier in the week or saw right after the game. I just read it on Monday. 11 sacks through the first 2 games, and that's the most in 20 years. I know that's more in the pass defense side of things. And obviously the pass rush in the pass and the secondary and the pass rush go together. You know that. But clogging up the run, they knew they had to adjust some things. Remember the first and second down success that Sam Houston had, an obvious difference in caliber of opponent going to week 2 against Texas Southern, but the principles were there. They were really happy with the way they went against the run against TSU and just the way they went about it. So I think making pressure on Smith, but what do you do once he gets out of that pocket and can use those legs to run? That's what worries me the most in the respect. I guess I said that earlier, repeating myself, but it goes with Smith. You know, they've got Manjack out wide too, who is he's a speedy little devil out there out wide, and has Rice been tested a little bit on the secondary. We know what happened in the big play from Sam Houston in week 1, where they slipped by the back of the defense, and folks have shown no problem trying to test the Rice secondary in the last few years. And that wasn't really much of a case against TSU, but I'm interested to see what Coach Fritz and Coach Barbay draw up to try to test the Rice secondary, because I don't think they're just not going to be aggressive. You don't think of Coach Fritz as that type of coach per se, but very balanced. But you have to know that is an option, and Smith's the type of guy that can beat you there.
Well, and we were talking right before we got this about trivia. You want some Rice trivia in this game? Rice, and we mentioned a little bit, has 11 sacks through 2 games. You know where that ranks nationally?
It is up there, right? Top 5?
Number 1.
Number 1. There you go.
Rice has more sacks than any other team in college football. And you say, but Matthew, but wait. They've played a CUSA squad and an FCS squad. And I'm telling you, there's some teams that have played 3 games. There's some teams that have also played a couple cupcakes. Nobody else has 11, which is, it's just this is a team that had 23 sacks last season and lost Coleman Coco, and they're halfway to that number. And the craziest thing is there is 9 different players that are credited in those sack numbers, 11 sacks spread across 9 different guys. So that's the thing that, we talk about other X factors, things to watch in this game. Like, can Rice continue to keep it interesting with spreading out the pressure and who's going after you? Because I think that's something that defensive coordinator Brian Smith likes to kind of mix it up and come at you from all angles. Now he might actually have the pieces where he can send just about whoever he wants. And we talk about things that tilt in favor of the Owls. Houston's offensive line, 1 guy back from last year, a bunch of new pieces in transition. If you can bring pressure and confusion there, then you talk about what is even the better quarterbacks need is they need time. And if you can limit the amount of time Donovan Smith has to beat you by pressuring that offensive line, then it gets interesting.
Yeah, totally agree. The whole game changes. You know me, you've known me long enough. Coach Calhoun, I'm sure all the other assistant coaches are jealous, but he's my favorite assistant coach from the perspective of being tough, fitting into the Rice scheme, but you have to have that type of mentality on defense, and that's wearing off. And their success has paid off the last few years. You mentioned losing Coco, but getting Charlie Lewis in there and really developing Michael Larby, the Duke transfer from 2 years ago, but he has that extra year. And we've seen some good pressure from Damone Green, but it's really spread out. It's like so many guys have made those plays. Josh Piercy led them in tackles in week 1, but he's playing more a little bit off the ball this year. So it's not just 1 or 2 guys. Like you said, I was worried that with DeBraylon Carroll going to the South Plains at Texas Tech, I was like, how are they going to replace him? Well, Isaiah Floyd moved over a little bit in his spot. Blake Banish, I mean, that's another name that really deserves mention, the way he has really taken over more of that 3 technique and not getting the numbers per se, but just clogging it up the middle. He's a big old mean rice farmer there from Needville. So his grandfather actually is a rice farmer. That's why we call him down in the broadcast. But yeah, I could go on and on about the defensive line. As you can see, they don't get a lot of glory, but they don't really want that, the way they can pressure things. Do you
And
want to
they'll
look at
share the
their-
glory if they can get that many sacks.
Do you want to look at? I can queue up. Do you want to look at their defense?
Yeah. Ping up defense for a little bit real quick, because I think one guy I want to highlight is one of their two guys coming back that played in this game last year. Already has an interception for them this year on defense. That is Mr. Halsey.
Come
We can
on,
find
Morty.
him in the we got a couple in here, but he's one to watch there in the secondary. And there you go, free
Local
safety,
kid.
Mr. AJ Halsey has an interception on the year, another local kid. And you talk about guys that understand. I there's just a little bit in here, man. If you played in this game and you were here last year, you have that extra chip. And he's a guy that I don't know if Rice wants to make unhappy, because he will be on fire in this one on Saturday.
Yeah, he's good. Webb is really good. Paytow kid came from Tulane with Coach Fritz. You see McCutcheon there on the outside, played at USC and OU. I mean, they've got Morris is outstanding there in the middle. But underneath, you look, Carlos Allen is the guy. Andrew Pate is a great sports information guy. I was reading one of his nuggets that Carlos Allen up the middle, this is my big matchup on defense for U of H against Rice. Chad Lindbergh just had his first start, and I don't know the specific grade out, but he made a big difference there. And Brant Banks told me on Monday that they adjusted some things with his technique. Yes, I know, again, caveat, go for Sam Houston playing TSU, which will be good down the line at their level. But Carlos Allen on the inside is going to wreak some problems. He leads the Big 12 in the rush defense metrics and top 4 in the nation. So how does Rice's interior, namely Lindbergh and company, Long on the other side, how do they match up against that big defensive front? Because you have to have just fallen off the turnip truck to not know that U of H always has a great interior line. So that's my big key. Yeah, they find guys.
One interesting story, which I was lured to, the guys at the Scott and Holman podcast, they do a great job covering Houston. Sam on their show alerted me to this week, and it'll be going up for subscribers on the Roost Patreon later this week. But Michael Batten, one of their starting linebackers, get this, the name rang a bell, started out as a receiver at Houston Christian, transferred to Louisiana Monroe, where he switched to linebacker, ended up leading the Warhawks in tackles last season, and now has become a fixture on the Houston defense, one of the most tenacious guys, racking up a ton of tackles already. So you want to talk about full circle. Houston native, went to school at HCU, left the state, came back, and now is starting for one of the hometown teams. Another guy who has something to play for in this one. I just thought that was you don't often hear of the receiver turned walk-on turned linebacker turned Big 12 caliber athlete, and yet here we are.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's getting on the broadcast, Matthew, and I may or may not credit you. That's a good note.
It's not me. I'll send you who to credit, but some great guys over Scott and Holman podcast. We love them. Another reason that I need the bucket back every year is so I can talk with my friends. That's what this is really about.
I can't wait. I think, like you referenced, kind of tying things up here, looks like unfortunately you can't connect with Ted, but it's the trophy, man. You play for games like this, you coach for games like this, you announce for games like this. In your case, you write for games like this. To have that type of juice, you don't know, every game's a big game, but you don't always get this type of extra juice in type of it. And the closest FBS distance between two rivals in a game like this, the history that goes back in the old Southwest Conference days. We are wrapping up. We have the last couple minutes. If anybody is still out there that has any final thoughts to pontificate on, we can take your comments. Please like or share. But what does this one come down to in the end?
I want to add one quick thing. And, oftentimes when you think about these games, you're like, oh, yeah, it's a game. It's important. It's a rivalry game. But it hit me like for the first time, probably a Saturday after the game against Texas Southern. And I am walking out of the press conference that they just had. And for those who don't know, the Bayou Bucket Trophy has been at the front of the main meeting room for the football team for the past year. You cannot walk into a Rice football meeting without seeing the Bayou Bucket. And I didn't realize how much, just as someone who covers the team, how I was like, oh, this is nice that it is here. Yeah. And you brought it out to the radio show. I didn't get myself a picture with the bucket. That's a missed opportunity. I have pictures of the bucket, but so Rice got to win this so I can get myself a picture with it. But I was like, that's when it first hit me on Saturday night. I'm like, oh, this trophy could not be here in a week. And it was that point where I'm like, well, they better win the game now. So the fact that this isn't something that, Rice kept up in the case and was like, that's cool. It's like, no, every player has walked past this every day for a year. And it's something that they don't want to not walk past. I'll tell you that.
And I did not get permission, but Nate and I were just doing our midweek check-in, talking about some of the behind-the-scenes particulars. You got to make sure Hollywood Nate Griffin, the big TV star, shows up on time. And inevitably, that goes down to talking ball. You can't have two friends with as much love between us as we don't talk about. Yeah, we just get into it like this, just start talking. And his synopsis, which I totally agree with, is they've got to come out with that mean streak. You remember it just wasn't there against Sam Houston for whatever reason. We know they're mad about it though, and they carried that anger against Texas Southern. Now, that's not Texas Southern on the other side of the field you're playing. Does that type of intensity keep up? I'm not saying you definitely win if you come out with your pants on fire, but they've got to have that type of oomph, and not just rivalry up. They've got to come out the mean streak. You saw the penalties go up against Texas Southern. That's one of the questions I meant to ask Coach Bloomgren, that sometimes when you're more aggressive, you'll take some of those penalties, which I think we saw that against TSU. That was really the only blemish on that resume, but they've got to come out with that chip on their shoulder and continue to learn that lesson against Sam Houston. You don't take anybody for granted. And who knows, like we were texting, this could end up being their biggest game of the year. You don't know what the rest of the season holds. Every rivalry game is a mammoth game. The fan bases, coaches, players, announcers, writers, blah, blah, blah. We all know it. And I just can't wait to see how it unfolds.
Yeah. And I will say, not that this is how you folks might be thinking in the building, but, we talked about at the beginning of the show about those people in the desert, right? How smart they are. They said at this point, they thought Rice was a 2-1 football team through 3 games. And if you win this game, you're 2-1. And I will just tell you this. If you could give anyone in that building truth serum and you said you get to pick which one game you definitely want to win, this would be the one. So if you can take 2-1, you can get back to par, quote unquote, and one of those wins is over Houston. It just sets you up pretty nice for where you want to go. Got to go to Army, got a lot of games coming, but this would be one that would be nice to win before we get into AAC play.
Amen to that. I can't wait. I think you're making this road trip. And yeah, you're making the Army road trip. We can talk about that next week too, but I can't wait, man. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah. We will be back next year. Yeah, well, next year too. But next week, next week, recapping Houston a little bit, previewing our trip to West Point, taking any of your food recommendations up in New York, all of that. So we'll get there, rain or shine, one way or another. We'll be back. Thank you all for sticking out with us, joining in. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate you listening, sharing this. Subscribing, liking, tweeting, Xing, DMing, whatever. All of it.
Do it all. Yeah.
All the stuff that we're not tech savvy enough to tell you to do that. And we'll be back next week. So thank you for sticking with us. Rice Fight
never dies, baby. Never dies. Where's that bucket at? Let's keep them bucking.